Okay, the story of Samson. I started studying the story of Samson 15 years ago. After I hearing many sermons and still hear them during that 15-year period of here's a story of Samson. Don't be like Samson. He was a jerk. He blew it, and God punished him for it. So I haven't taken that ideal of what the Bible is about for a very long time. Uh, that is as a morality tale. The Bible is about morality, how to be good and how to be bad, and if you're good, good things will happen to you. Bad things will happen to you. Uh, and that's the purpose of the Bible. It's easy for people to get into that space because why? They go, what's wrong with? Why am I a sinner? Why am I having these bad effects? Why is bad things happening to me? Because I'm sinning. So what do? You stop sinning and things will get better. Well, that's not what Christianity is all about by any means, but it's an easy thing to fall into. I just got to clean my life up, ideal. So the Samson, where I got this perspective of the Old Testament is really summarized in what Christ said when the scribes and Pharisees came to him, saying, they're criticizing what he was doing. He's hanging around with the wrong people. He's hanging around with scribes and he's hanging around with publicans and sinners. He's hanging around with prostitutes. He's hanging around with all these people. He shouldn't be doing that. Obviously, there's something wrong with you, Jesus. So this is what Christ said to these the very righteous, moral people of the day. He said, "You search the scriptures, and in them you think you have eternal life, but these are they that testify of me." So what that means is they were looking in the Old Testament and all the rules and the regulations and measuring themselves with these things, and they thought they were going to get eternal life because of how well they kept these rules and laws. In them they think they had eternal life. But Christ is saying, no, these are they, that is the Old Testament rules, regulation, laws, stories, everything in it speak of him. That is, the Bible is to reveal who God is and who Christ is to us. And the Old Testament that's its purpose. It's not, here's the rules, keep them or be damned. It's these hidden stories of God and Christ, and not just hidden stories, but finding out how he deals with people and what his character is like. So, from that's been my perspective for decades in reading the Old Testament, and I've read it a lot. So anyway, we're going to get into the life of Samson in this, using this perspective. So immediately in the first chapter of is Judges chapter 13, it's about his birth. And in his birth, it says that he is an angel comes to his soon-to-be mother, and the angel says, "You are barren; you cannot have children, but you are going to have a miraculous child, and he will deliver his people." And so this is right immediately. You have a significant type of Christ, things that point towards Samson being a type of Christ, in that of a woman who is past her, says that she's barren. You ain't gonna have any. You cannot physically have any children. You're barren. When you have there's three women that are barren in the Old Testament that have children, miraculous children. The most famous one is Sarah, who gives birth to Isaac at the age of 99 years old. And it was physically impossible for that to happen. So this is a type of the virgin birth. And Isaac is a type, that is a symbolic person that represents Christ. The other person is Joseph, who was born in the very late life of his mother, Leah. Was it Leah? And he's the one that went to Egypt and became the right-hand man of Pharaoh, and he is very, very clearly a type of Christ. And now you've got this third character, and he is a type of Christ. But he's why isn't this more well known? Well, you have an exemplary life in the life of Isaac, and especially in Joseph. But Samson is so criticized that he's buried in muck. So we're going to wash some of the muck off of Samson and see who he really is in his position in the Old Testament. So, all right. So we've got a virgin birth. We have also a declaration from an angel. It's called an annunciation. Christ had an annunciation. Isaac had an annunciation. So it's just not some person that had an older person. Well, this lady, she's like 40 years old and she had a baby. That's like a miracle. No. This is a barren woman that there is an annunciation. An angel shows up and goes, "You're going to have a baby." It was significant. It was significant to the mother and father, because then when the father finds out, he goes, "Well, how are we supposed to raise a miracle baby? What are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to raise this child? I really want this angel to come back and tell us how to raise the child." So the angel comes back, and then the father goes, "How do we raise the child? Tell us the rules for raising this child." And the angel says exactly the same thing that he had told the mother. He told the mother, "Do not eat grapes. Do not drink grape juice. Do not drink anything alcoholic from the vine, fermented vines. So nothing of the grape. And don't touch anything unclean." And that's it. And so the father goes, "Well, what else?" No. He's basically, what the angel is saying, this is on the mother. This isn't a vow that Samson has to take. This is something that he was called. It says he's called to be a Nazarene. The angel said it. He's called to be a Nazarene from birth to death. He didn't take a vow of the Nazarene. He was called to it. Just as Christ was called to be set apart and holy unto God from birth. So what is a Nazarene? A Nazarene was a person that took a vow that said, I'm going to dedicate myself to God for a certain period of time. And then when they took the vow, they would shave their head, and then they would not let it cut it again until the vow was over. Then they went back and shaved their head again. The vow's over. So and during that vow, they couldn't drink any alcohol. They couldn't touch any unclean thing. Those were the two of the main things they couldn't do. And if they had accidentally touched, if they took a vow for 6 months, and there was 5 months and 28 days, and they accidentally touched something unclean, they had to start over again. They go shave their head. They had to start from day one, another 6 months, because they had to fulfill that vow. So he was, that's what a Nazarene was, someone that was set aside, that had chose to set themselves aside to God, but for a period of time. But he was called to be a Nazarene from birth. He did not take any vows, and the only thing that was put upon him was not. It was put upon his mother, and it was also said, "Don't shave his head." Shaving the head is a symbol. It doesn't. When the symbol was, your vow's over, start over again. So. So the next thing we're going to look at here is the name of Samson, and then this is going to tie up the birth part. The name of Samson means like the sun. So if you can't grasp that, how that could be a typical a type or a metaphor for Christ. Christ very clearly said, "I am the light of the world." John just goes overboard in the book of John and in the epistles of John about saying, Christ is light, and equating that with truth. And he's the truth that comes to the world. So Samson means like the sun. S-U-N, like the sun, like the light. And he is like Christ. He's a picture of Christ. Here's another signpost saying this is who this guy is, and these are in his in his birth. We have three things that just point right to this fact that he is a Christ-like figure. He's gonna have a Christ-like duties and his everything he does in his life is going to point towards Christ. So the next thing we're going to have is his marriage. So the next chapter starts off, chapter 14. He goes wandering into the next village. He sees a Philistine woman. He falls in love with her. He goes to his parents, says, "Get me that woman. I want to marry her." And they go, No. You're not supposed to marry outside of your people. Find somebody right here. You got a nice cousin down the street or whatever, right? So stick with your family. He goes, "No, I got to have this woman." Now this is a huge criticism of another criticism of Samson. He's trying to marry outside his faith. However, people who say that, and I've heard everybody say that talks badmouth Samson, it says that, but his parents didn't understand that this was from the Lord, that this was God's intention for him to fall in love with this woman and seek her out as a bride. So, do we have another person, possibly in the Old Testament, that married a Gentile bride, sought out a Gentile bride, and the seeking out of that Gentile bride brought all kinds of trouble to the church, to the gospel? Christ came to bring the Gentiles into the faith. Before him, it was only the Jews. There was a state of the Jews, and then after his death and resurrection, the gospel went out to the Gentiles, and everything got stirred up. So it's interesting that where Samson came from, the town means hornet's nest. So we're going to see, just like Christ stirred up the hornet's nest when he sent his spirit into the Gentile world, and as they said in one of the towns, that when Paul showed up, the guy that has turned the world upside down has showed up here. So Samson's about to, just like as Christ did, he's about to turn the world upside down, his world. So he goes to visit his the woman. Of course, they lived in actually two different countries. The one was Philistine, the other one was the land of Dan, of Israel, the tribe of Dan, their heretical lands. So he was going there, and when he was going, he was attacked by a lion. Everybody seen this story, the movies about it. The big strong guy, and he's wrestling with it. He barely gets it, and finally he kills it, and then he leaves and comes back later, and he sees there's honey in the inside the carcass of the lion, and he makes up this riddle. So we'll go to the riddle a little bit forward, but this is another thing I want to say about Samson, is that Samson was not a huge, muscular guy that looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger. That was not who he was. There's no description of Samson in the Bible. It alludes to his strength. It says when he had this, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and then he had this amazing strength. And a significant part of the story with Delilah is that the Philistines are paying her money so that she will find out the source of his strength. What is the source of your strength? It's a big mystery. It wouldn't be a mystery if he was built like an Adonis. It was a mystery. How is this guy whooping us? We don't understand it. There has to be a source. There has to be a power behind him. And it's the Spirit of the Lord. Every time he does something, it says the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he rose up and accomplished some great deed. It wasn't his physical prowess. It wasn't his big strength. It wasn't his muscles. It wasn't his hair. It was the Spirit of the Lord. So anyway, he kills this lion, and it says that he kills this lion like a man kills a kid. He rends it. Rending, when you have a young kid, a young goat, and you don't want the young goats, mainly if it's a male goat. Nobody wants a bunch of male goats. So they usually kill them right off as soon as they come out. They don't make milk. They don't do anything. They just raise havoc. So you just get it and twist its head off. You break its neck right there. Any normal man can do it. Break its neck. Then you can pull its arms off. It's disassembling a kid isn't difficult. So this is how he kills the lion. It wasn't like an epic battle. He just like snapped it in half. So this is showing you also like the what came upon him was a supernatural strength. It wasn't like look at my muscles. I can whip this lion barely, but I can whip it. No. So he kills the lion, and then we have he comes back. He sees the dead lion with the honey in it, and he goes and takes some of the honey out and eats it, and later he gives it to his parents. Now here's the next criticism. Oh, Samson touched something that was dead. He touched something that's unclean. So if you do that, you have broken your vow of a Nazarene. But he never took a vow of the Nazarene. So he was not breaking any vows when he did this. Now the real significance of this is that Jesus Christ, who was God incarnate, who was came from this clean vessel, as we talked about his mother, and he came from something that was clean, and he was clean. He touched unclean things constantly. There was a girl that was dead. He touched her. Can't do that. You can't do that in their culture. You can't touch a dead person. There was the woman that had an issue of blood. It made her unclean. And she came along, and he touched her and healed her. There was lepers. He touched lepers and healed them. All of these things are completely against Levitical law. Not just for a Nazarene, for anybody. If he had done this, he would have had to have gone, separated himself, and gone through a cleansing ritual to make himself clean. But he didn't have to, because he was clean. He came from a clean vessel. He was God. And Samson also did not become contaminated by touching this dead lion. And later on we're going to see that he picks up the jawbone of an ass, which is a dead donkey's jawbone, and that's where he kills the Philistines with. And once again, he's criticized. Well, he touched something unclean again. This moron can't get nothing right, right? Every time he turns around, he does something wrong. So that's when we get this religious spirit of criticism, and you start reading the story like a scribe and Pharisee would read it, where you're reading it and it says, well, he's breaking these rules. Here's another rule he broke another rule, but we're not seeing the story behind the story, the Christ story. So he makes up this riddle. The riddle is, out of the eater, something to eat; out of the strong, something sweet. This is a riddle about the honey being in the lion, that he presents to his wedding feast all of the sinners and that come to his wedding feast, and he presents this thing to him and says, well, let's make a bet that you can't figure out this riddle. And they can't figure it out. So they threaten to kill his wife, and so she finally tells them the riddle. So what is this riddle about? Now, a lion with honey in it. So a lion speaks symbolically in the Bible of could be two different people. There's the Lion of the tribe of Judah. That would be Jesus Christ himself, the lion, the king of beasts, a real lion with real power. And then there's another lion. It says that the devil walks around like a roaring lion. It didn't say he's a lion. He is a lion. He's not having equality with the power, the king of beasts, who Christ is symbolized as. But he's like one. He pretends to be one. He likes to roar and try to scare people, but he can't really do too much. He's a bully. So if you take either one of these symbols, or both of them if you want to, that there's a death, the death of death, you could say. The death of, in one you could say the death of Christ, and then one with the devil you could say the death of death, because of the power. It says that his power is in death. The power of the devil is in death. So death dies, Christ dies, and from out of that comes what? Honey. Now, honey is, there's nothing super symbolic. Everybody knows what's the land of Palestine about. What was they were told? This is the land of milk and honey, and that means a place of abundance, a place of life, a place of complete supply. Milk and honey are like the extras. They were the whipped cream on top of everything. You had your bread, you had your vegetables, you had your stuff that sustained you. But boy, if things were good, you had honey and you had milk. Those were like the special foods that were like, wow, this is, you can you got your milk, you can make butter, you can make cheese, you can do all this. It was just milk and honey were great things, and that's what they were symbolized: prosperity, blessing. There's a story about Jonathan where he's talking about he was fighting. He was getting hungry. He ate a little bit of honey, and his eyes brightened. It renewed his soul and spirit and strength. That's what honey is about in the Bible. So, at any rate, tragedy happens. Oh well, first you have another riddle. I didn't want to get completely away from riddles, because who in the New Testament loves to talk about in parables and riddles and hidden stories? We have a riddle right here: is the out of the eater something to eat, and out of the strong something sweet. And then later, when they find out when they tell him his riddle, this is what he says: "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you had not solved my riddle." Well, there's another riddle. What's plowing with your heifer mean? It means you made her go to work for you. She's the one. You worked her, and then you got the answer to my riddle. So here's another riddle. There's a third riddle that he talks about later with the, it's a little more of a hidden riddle because you have to know some of the Hebrew stuff about the jawbone of the ass and water coming from it. And it's an idiom in Hebrew that I can't even explain. I just read about it, but it's another riddle. It's another way of poetically speaking things. And Christ was the master at that. Parables. Things, little stories that nobody understood. He would tell these parables, and afterwards, his disciples would come to him and says, "What were you talking about?" They didn't even know. He had to explain it to them. He spoke in mysteries all the time. And guess what? This story is a mystery that is spoken that I'm trying to bring out and reveal to my listeners. So, a riddle maker. So he tragedy ensues, and then the hornet's nest gets stirred up, and Samson really starts attacking the Philistines, killing them, and the repercussions of that are the Philistines don't want to go chasing Samson because they've already learned their lesson. So they go to the next tribe over. There's the tribe of Dan. Say it was right here. Here's the Philistines. And up here is the tribe of Judah. That is everybody that their families all came from this one patriarch named Judah. So they don't go to the tribe of Dan, the Philistines. They go to the tribe of Judah because they were much more powerful, and they weren't invested in Samson. And they said, "You go and get Samson, or we will kill all of you." So they go, "Okay." So they went to Samson, and he was living in a cave. And they said, "Hey, sorry, but you've got to come with us. We're going to turn you over to the enemy." And he goes, "Well, okay, that's what you got to do. That's fine." Says, "Tie me up, but you just promise me that you won't kill me." They go, "We promise we won't kill you. We're going to turn you over to the other guys. They're going to kill you." He goes, "Okay." So they bind his hands behind him, and they take him to the Philistines. Now, in Christ, there was two betrayals. He had two separate betrayals. The first betrayal is when the tribe of Judah, the exact same tribe, not any of the other 11 tribes, the tribe of Judah bound him and took him to the Romans, the Roman government, the people that had authority over them. Just like at this point, the Philistines had authority over them. And they took them, and they said, "Well, we have no authority to kill him. We're not going to kill Jesus. We will hand them over to someone else that will kill them." Well, if that's not a parallel, I don't know what is. You've got the same tribe doing the same thing that happened in the life of Christ. So they take him, and in this case, he breaks the bonds. The Spirit of the Lord comes upon him. He just breaks these bonds. I'm pretty sure he was tied up pretty good because they know he was capable of doing all kind of crazy stuff. So he broke the bonds after the Spirit of God came upon him, not because he had a bunch of muscles on him. He ripped those apart, and he found the jawbone of an ass, which unclean thing, but it doesn't matter because he is clean. He's a clean vessel. He picks it up and kills 1,000 of them. He batters them. And so, of course, they retreat, and That's one of the most famous things that he did. Oh, here's his riddle. With a donkey's jawbone, I have made a donkey out of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I have killed 1,000 men. So, I guess it wasn't I think there is an idiom in there that I read, but I can't recall it. But it's obviously a little play on words and a poem, a little story that he loved to tell, which is Christ also loved to tell these hidden stories. So now we're going to get to it says here Samson, Delilah, but it's not the first story. Samson and Delilah is kind of the last of this his story. But before that, there is a story where he goes to, once again, he's seeking out a woman. He's seeking out a woman of the night in the city of Gath. So he goes there, seeking her out, and the Philistines go, oh, he's in town. So they lock the gates with the anticipation that in the morning he'll have to come through the gates. They'll have all of their troops ready to attack him. They will, now he's in their territory. They feel confident they can kill him. So here's another criticism of Samson. Look at Samson. What is he doing? Oh, he's hanging around with prostitutes. He's hanging around with sinners. He's in the town of sinners, hanging around with whores. And what was one of the major criticisms of Christ by the moralist of the day, the right and wrongest. Doesn't the prostitutes washing his feet, and all the religious people are looking, doesn't he? I thought he was a prophet. Doesn't he know who she is? Because I know who she is. That's a whore. Why is he letting a whore touch his feet? Why is he letting a whore in his house? Why is he associating with a whore? Why is he associating with tax collectors, drunkards, sinners? Why? We don't do that because we're too holy. We're too separate. We're too good to hang around with such people. Does that ring a bell a little bit, possibly, about how the goggles possibly you got to put on, take off the self-righteous goggles, and put on the goggles of who this person is a symbol of. So at any rate, he wakes up in the middle of the night, Samson does, and he goes out. All the gates are locked, and so what he does, so the Spirit of God comes upon him, and he pulls up the gate, puts it on his back, and he walks for 40 miles and delivers it to a significant town in Israel. He takes it out. He captures the gates. And these gates were not, there was the gates that they locked up at night. In the daytime, you had, wagons going both ways. Huge, thick, heavy gates that were meant to protect the city if they were being attacked. They were significantly big and heavy. So he picks them up and captures them. Now, when you have in the prophecy that was given to Abraham, when God was talking to Abraham, he goes, "This is the three things that your children will do. That will happen to your children. They will be like the stars of the sky." That is the spiritual children of Abraham, the children of faith. They'll be like the sand of the sea. That's the physical children of Abraham, which is not only the Jews, but all the Arabs, and many, many nations came from Abraham. So there's the physical, there's the spiritual, and they will capture the gates of the enemy. Now, when Christ died, it talks about what he did in the writings of Paul and some other writers. I'm not exactly sure if it's Paul, I think it is, but he took captivity captive. That he captured death. He captured the gates of death and hell. He conquered death, and these are what these gates are symbol of. He took the gates of the enemy. He conquered death. They're no longer a bastion for the Christian to worry about. It's conquered. This is that's extremely significant. Why would they put this little story? Samson was hanging around with a bunch of whores, and then he woke up and drunk and decided to grab this gate and pull it out and walk 40 miles with it. Well, that's just stupid. It's just stupid unless there's a story behind it, and a story behind all of these little stories. I tell you, I don't know all of them. I've only been studying it for 15 years, so I can't know all of them. But now we're going to get into the story of Delilah. Now, Delilah is about the second betrayal. Not only was Jesus betrayed by his own people, by the Jews, he was betrayed by someone that intimately knew him, and that was Judas, someone that ate with him, walked with him, talked with him, someone that was in the 12, the elite, those that when he went to explain these parables to people, to them disciples, when he said they called the disciples together, that was Judas was always right there. So it was significant that he was betrayed by the Jews, but he was also betrayed by a beloved one, someone he was intimate with. So here you have Samson and Delilah, and what happens with Delilah? I alluded to this a little earlier, is that the Philistines come to her and they go, listen, we want to know the source of his power. Find out the source of his power. It wasn't his muscles. Find out the source of his power, and we will give you a lot of money. They poured the money down on her to do this. And she goes, okay. So she started questioning him. And there's the same question. What's the source of your power? What's the source of your power? And he resisted that 6 times, and the 7th time he finally told her what the source of his power was. And then she cut his hair. He was bound. He was taken away. Now, this is really the latest part of this story that I kind of, God opened this up to me and showed me what it was. And it comes from just a little verse in the New Testament where is talking about this once again, Christ's worst enemies, the religious people, really his only enemies, the religious people of the day, the moralists of the day, the right and wrongers. So the right and wrongers, it says that they hired men of Belial, which are men of the devil. They hired men of the Belial to go and ask him where he got his power, to try to trick him into saying where he got his power. Whoa, when I read that, I just like, the lights went on as far as Delilah goes. The enemy was paying him to find out this one thing. And he resisted. And when he was being asked these questions by these men of Belial, it says, these liars, these deceivers, these trickers, they didn't care about the truth. They were looking for just one little thing to get him with. So he never answered them. Jesus was famous for not giving direct answers. They would say, what do you think about the, he would always redirect it. And the redirection would be, what about you and God? Basically is what he would do. He goes, you're not, he knew what they were thinking. He would go, you're not asking me a question because you're curious. You're not asking me because you're a seeker. You're not asking me because you want to know the truth. You're asking me to trick me. I'm not an idiot, and I'm not gonna follow your baloney questions because they're not authentic. So he asked them a question or evaded it somehow or other until he was on trial. He was in the secret meeting where the Jewish leaders had brought him from the Garden of Gethsemane, brought him bound, and they were questioning him. And so they finally asked him. They asked him the question. I don't know if it was the seventh time, but it was the last time. They go, "Who are you?" He goes, "I am the Son of the living God." And he'd never said that before in public, and that was it. They go, "Okay, that's it. Thank you. Now we have what we needed. Now we can destroy you. You have blasphemed. That's worthy of death. You are going to die. Thanks." So eventually Christ revealed who he was. And when he revealed who he was, when he revealed the source of his power, that was his Godhead, his divinity, they go, "You're dead." And when Samson revealed who he was, the source of his power, his hair, which was symbolic of his dedication to God, now he's dedicated. When that is removed, the spirit, it's kind of a funny thing. He didn't get skinny all of a sudden. He was always like in the movies, like really big and muscular, and now he cut his hair off. Well, what difference does that make if his power came from being big and muscular? Because it didn't. So, anyways, he's thrown into prison. He's humiliated. Now, prison is always often talked about a symbol of hell, but I'm not going to get into that. We know that Christ died and went to the underworld. Hell doesn't mean, when I say hell, I don't mean, most people don't understand what the word hell means. Anyway, I'm not going to get into it. But, so he's drawn out, finally, his last day, he's drawn out to what? Public humiliation. Everybody's there to humiliate him, to say, hey, it's not like we've heard this before. Hey, if you're the Son of God, come down off of this throne. Oh, you're the big strong man. Why don't you put some whooping on us now? Yeah, who are you now? We got you. You're under our control. And they rained insults and humiliation down upon him. I left out one thing that I thought was kind of cool. Was when he was, after he'd killed the Philistines with the jawbone of the ass, he goes, "I thirst." And that's, who else said that in the Bible? Jesus Christ at the cross. And who else? Nobody. Nobody in the whole Bible cries out, "I thirst," and then God brings deliverance to them. So, anyways, here's Samson. He's brought out, humiliated, and he puts his arms upon the pillars, it says. He pushes upon the pillars, and when he pushes upon the pillars, what is his body posture? He is it's a cross. One hand is here, one hand is here. He's standing like he's on a cross. He pushes these down. The building falls upon him. He dies, and everybody in the stadium dies. It's a complete collapse of tears and death. So here we have Christ's greatest victory. The greatest victory, it says the greatest victory of Samson was his death. In his death, he killed more than in his life. His greatest victory was his death. And Christ, his greatest victory was his death. Over and over again, he would go, this is the purpose. This is why I came. I came to die. I came to be crucified. I came to be put on a cross. My purpose was death, so that I could redeem others through my death. I could destroy death by my death. So this is as much as I've got, and I think it's overwhelming that we need to redeem Samson. That we need to say Samson was a man of God that not only fulfilled his mission from God, which was to defeat the Philistines, but was one of the most complete pictures of Christ. I'm not saying one of the most complete picture of Christ in the whole Old Testament. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you.